I came home from work one late afternoon, tired, ready to kick off my boots and sink into the couch, when I saw its splintered remains of my cedar fence, a chainsaw still leaning against the post like it had been dropped in the middle of a job. And there she was, my brand new neighbor Lydia, standing on my side of the property line, sipping a green smoothie like she was at a spa retreat instead of the scene of a crime. She pointed at the hole in the fence like she was unveiling a new invention. "You're welcome," she said. "Now I can walk straight through instead of around." For a second I thought maybe it was a prank or some kind of performance art. But Nosh had literally chainsawed a 10-foot section of my fence because walking an extra 60 feet to her driveway was, apparently, an outrage against her personal freedom. I asked her, half stunned, "Did you seriously just cut down my fence for shortcut access?" And she looked at me like I'd asked if water was wet. "It's not a backyard," she said, smooth as butter. "That's shared open space. You just fenced it off like it was yours." Then she turned and walked back to her porch, her smoothie sloshing in rhythm with her smugness. That was the moment something in me shifted. Not rage, not panic, just a quiet disbelief that someone could be that bold, that entitled. Now, I'm not a drama guy. I mow my lawn, I pay my taxes, I mind my business. But Lydia had only lived there for 6 months, and in that short time she'd already reported me twice to some imaginary HOA. Once for excessive grass growth, and once for a threatening garden gnome. I'd brushed those off as harmless sparks of her eccentricity. This thought was different. This was deliberate, and it was personal. So, I did what I always do when something doesn't add up. I started digging. I pulled out the original property survey from 1987, called up the county zoning office, and within a day I had the truth. Not only was my fence perfectly legal, but the narrow strip Lydia was claiming wasn't hers at all. She hadn't even paid taxes on it in 3 years. It had slipped through the cracks during her shady refinance. And guess what? That parcel was heading for auction at the end of the quarter. An auction open to private citizens. Citizens like me. I put in a quiet pre-bid. $117 later, I legally owned the very land she'd claimed as her shortcut. I didn't tell her. I didn't brag. I just waited. Meanwhile, she escalated. She threw a backyard party that spilled into my mulch. Her guests parked halfway on my lawn. She strung lights across the gap in my fence like she was hosting a festival. Every time I asked her to stop, she laughed it off like I was the one being unreasonable. But the day my deed came in the mail, I hired a contractor. Not for another fencino. This time I went for a 6-foot privacy wall, tall and clean, stamped with a bright blue sign, private property. No trespassing. When she came back from yoga that Saturday and saw her shortcut bricked shut, the screaming started before I even stepped outside. "You can't build this here," she shrieked. "This is my access point. You're blocking me in." I calmly handed her a copy of the deed in a neat folder. She scanned it like she expected it to catch fire, but her eyes gave her away. She knew she'd lost. But Lydia wasn't the type to back down. The next week a county inspector showed up at my door, muttering about a drainage violation. When I showed him the permits and the photos of her landscaping rerouting water into my yard, he sighed and muttered, "Yikes." That same day, a pile of compost appeared in my driveway, reeking of desperation. I cleaned it up with a smile. Then came the letters her lawyer threatening nuisance suits, demanding I restore neighborhood access. My reply was short and sweet. "You destroyed my fence, trespassed on my land, failed to pay taxes, and I now own the property. Direct further correspondence to my counsel." I didn't even have a lawyer yet, but the bluff worked. Hers stopped returning her calls. And still, she pushed, filing zoning complaints, trying to argue historical right-of-way. The board laughed her out of the room. She wasn't done, though. A utility crew showed up one morning, orange flags in my yard, saying they had orders to reroute a gas line through the strip. My stomach dropped. A forged work order under her name. That was the final straw. I filed a police report for impersonation. The detective who followed up told me Lydia had a history, small stuff, nuisance violations, but enough to show a pattern. That's when I went deeper. And buried in county records, I found the gold mine. Her garage, the one she bragged about converting into a yoga studio, was actually sitting partly on a parcel she didn't own. Forgotten land from decades back, still technically held by an old estate. And guess what? That sliver was also headed to auction. I bought it for the price of a microwave. 2 weeks later, I slid a polite letter under her door. Your structure is encroaching on my land. Tear down your garage or write me a check with a lot of zeros. She stormed to my porch in her bathrobe, mascara smeared, mug in hand. You've gone too far, she hissed. This is harassment. This is malicious property warfare. I looked her straight in the eye and said, No, Lydia. This is real estate. She dumped her coffee on my doormat and stormed off. From that moment on, the cracks showed. A crooked for sale by owner sign popped up in her yard. The listing online was laughable edited photos hiding the missing garage wall, the backyard blocked by my privacy wall. Price inflated 20% above market. The kicker? A fine print clause, subject to buyer resolving minor encumbrance with adjacent parcel owner. Translation: she was trying to pass her mess to someone else. When that failed, she got sneaky. A shell LLC tried to buy the land under her garage, but the registered agent turned out to be her cousin. When I called their bluff, I gave them a number so high it was basically comedy. Days later she was on my porch again, this time with no makeup, no charm, just fury. Do you honestly think you can bleed me like this? You're ruining everything, she snapped. And I told her, calm as ever, no, Lydia. I'm protecting what's mine. You started this the day you cut my fence. The stress was getting to her. Neighbors whispered. Her party stopped. The yard grew wild. But I wasn't done. I found yet another easement behind her so-called tranquility garden, reclassified as abandoned and headed for auction over a few thousand in unpaid fees. I paid it. Suddenly, I owned her shortcut, her garage foundation, and her garden path. Piece by piece, I boxed her in. She panicked, tried to sell again, this time to a mysterious developer in a suit. They filed a rezoning application to build townhouses. But zoning boards listened to communities, and Lydia had made plenty of enemies. I rallied the neighbors' folks she'd crossed over the years, families, retirees, even the guy she once reported for unsanitary flag placement. We showed up in force. The board grilled her buyer over drainage, setbacks, easements. They stumbled. Approval was delayed indefinitely. The buyer disappeared. Her last hope crumbled. One weekend, I watched from my porch as a U-Haul pulled up. She loaded boxes, valuables maybe, then vanished. No goodbye, no wave. Just gone. I thought that was the end. But of course, she filed one last quiet title action, trying to retroactively claim ownership of the strip I'd bought. I came armed with a mountain of evidence: surveys, deeds, letters, photos, even transcripts from zoning meetings. When the judge asked why I'd named the parcel Lydia's Shortcut Memorial Park, I smiled and said, because ignoring boundaries has consequences. The courtroom chuckled. Her lawyer sighed. Case dismissed. I stood in that park later, watching the sun dip low over the neighborhood. Where her shortcut used to be was now a small gravel path that led to nowhere, shrubs lining the edges, a wooden archway at the entrance carved with the words, "Boundaries make good neighbors." It wasn't revenge anymore. It was peace. Neighbors came by, brought lawn chairs, cookies, even t-shirts that said "Shortcut Survivor." We laughed, swapped stories, healed together. And Lydia's old house? Foreclosed, peeling, sitting empty, a monument to stubbornness and spite. Looking back, I don't hate her. I pity her. Every move she made came from fear of losing control, of being irrelevant, of someone else being right. She thought dominance meant ownership, but she never understood that owning land isn't the same as controlling people. A fence isn't just wood, it's law, it's dignity, it's peace. And maybe that's the real takeaway. Sometimes the quiet neighbor isn't the pushover. Sometimes the quiet neighbor owns the land under your house. So, tell me, Hat, do you think? Was I right to keep pushing back, to fight fire with fire, or should I have let it go for the sake of peace? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because I know one thing for sure. In every neighborhood, there's a Lydia waiting to test the boundaries. The question is, what would you do when it's your fence?